nominally the moderator, but for those of you who have been to my events, you know that they all just turn into a great big conversation. So that's what I'm aiming for, ladies. So we'll just kind of keep the flow going. And you know, we're going to be talking about books specifically, but also about karma and magic. And if while we're having that conversation, somebody has some commentary or some thoughts or a different perspective that they want to like throw into the mix, wave your hand around, because I'm just super curious what we think these words mean. And that's actually where I'm going to start with both of you. Yeah, hey, y'all named this the Karma and Magic Tour. So I'm really curious what these words mean to you. And one of the things that I really want to explore tonight is how these topics are appearing in two really different books. So Jennifer's book, The Magic All Around, is Southern magical realism, like a la our dear Sarah Addison Allen, right? Whereas Love's book, Karma on Fire, is, I mean, I put it in romance, girlfriend. I know that you had some bigger words, but I think it's hardcore romance. And I don't read romance, not my genre, but I picked up that book. I mean, I read magical realism, so I expected to love Jennifer's book, but I don't really read romance. I read Karma on Fire. It would have been one sitting, except it got so freaking late. I had to go to sleep and finish it in the morning. So, you know, we have these two really different genres, but there's a through thread. Like when Jennifer first contacted me and told me that they were doing this tour, I was like, hold on a sec. What do these books have in common? So can you talk to me about like what you think magic is, what you think karma is, how they're kind of, how these things are coming to light in your book? Like, are you working with traditional definitions? Are you skewing things a little bit? And I feel like that's a good place to start. And I suspect that that's going to carry us for a good long time.
Okay. You want me to start?
Sure.
Okay. So thank you for that. Thank y'all for being here with us tonight. It's really great to see you. We've had a really wonderful long weekend here in Asheville. I haven't been in a really long time, but we've had a wonderful time. So thank y'all for coming out to spend time. Thank you, Maya. So for me, magic, there is some straightforward, magical, whimsical elements in the magic all around. So it's not Harry Potter magic. If you are familiar with Sarah Addison Allen, to me, it's like an enchanted book. There are things that happen that the locals in the book accept as everyday. They're still a little bit extraordinary, and Neil Gaiman calls it hyperreality. So we just accept that it's just part of our world, but we kind of know it's special as well. For me, magic is, the way I see the world is that I think love is magic. I think kindness is magic. I think there's everyday magic. And that is what I want to weave. And it's not what I want. I do weave it into my stories, that I think that you can have special gifts. So there are some people in my story who can not manipulate music, but if you've ever gotten in your car and your favorite song came on, you're like, wow, this is my favorite song. It's exactly what I needed to hear. That to me is a little bit like magic. It was exactly what you needed when you needed to hear it. And so in the story, Maddie, that's one of her skills. It's one of her gifts. If she comes into a room or gets in a car, the music will change. So it's a little magical. I mean, I don't get in my car and it just magically changes, but things happen a lot to me and I'm always looking for it. So for me, magic is literally everywhere. And I like to say that the signs are everywhere if you want to see them, and the signs are everywhere even if you don't see them. They're still everywhere. And I'm always on the lookout for anything magical, anything special, anything that feels like, oh, that's for me, or that's for Maya, or I'll call my friends. I'm like, I just saw this thing. I know that was for you, and I was supposed to call you and tell you that. Or your best friend texts you and you say, I was just thinking about you. That to me is magical. So my books do have some hyper reality, but then also just that really special stuff that makes community and the people you love. They're just really magical things about life and the connections that we have that I put in my books.
You know, I've never actually heard that term hyper reality. Are you all familiar with that? Am I like the outsider here? And what I love about it is it to me, what it says is if you pay extra attention, if you're hyper in your observance of reality, you see something different, which I think is a really beautiful way to think about magic. It's like it's there, but we have to take our observance up to that hyper level. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, Love, why don't you hit magic first, and then we'll do a karma round.
Love that. Love that. So first of all, the reason that we're on this tour together, we can talk about that later, but I love Jennifer's book. I love the magic that you feel when you're reading it. It helps you reconnect with that. And I think we all need to have that in our day, right? And there's times when we have challenges or we're having a fabulous day and we're like, oh, this day is so wonderful. All these great things are happening. That's magic. And when the days when you're kind of struggling, you know, and you're trying to find that magic, it's nice to kind of pick up a book like that and just relax. So we're on this tour together because we're fangirls of each other.
Yeah,
so
true.
that's part of it. And we'll tell you how we met a little later. It's a good story. As far as karma is concerned, the book takes place in Atlanta because I love the South, of course. It takes place in Atlanta, and then it also takes place in India. And when you think about the word karma, it has a very kind of negative connotation. People see it more like, you know, this is the punishment for something that you've done. But the way I see it is more love, right? So you continue to reap the more love you put out there, the more passion you put out there, the more helpful, anything that you're doing that's positive, I think that you're generating that karma. And you're not waiting for a day of the reaper, so to speak. So I was seeing karma from a more positive perspective. And then I'm also weaving in elements of what karma means in the Indian culture, right? So there's 4 different types of karma, and it's not overly complicated, but it's a lot. So our characters are dealing with the type of karma where they decide based on their current actions, they're going to kind of reconfigure their future. So some karmas think based on what happened in your family and historical, this is, you know, your legacy, this is what you're going to live. And these characters are saying, no, I'm going to make my own decisions. And so it's that kind of almost self propelment of the characters in the story, even though they're dealing with other things that are happening outside. So that's the on fire part. When you're trying to create your own destiny and you're creating your own destiny and you have parents and friends and employers and all the elements that come into your life kind of getting in your way and almost setting things on fire, it just puts that passion in you to say, I'm going to do it anyway, right? The more people say no, the more you say yes. So it was about love and seeing karma from a more positive perspective.
No, it's interesting because like for me, I when I pause it, like intellectually, I know that karma follows you based on your deeds, but I've always kind of thought of it as positive. So as I had that moment where I was like, wait, but isn't it you know, this idea that we have a destiny, right? And I think that weaves into your book a bit, Jennifer.
It does.
Yeah, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, I can. Thank you. So the main character, Maddie, she has been traveling all across the country her whole life with her mother. That's her best friend, her soul companion. And this is not a spoiler, but the book opens up with Maddie returning to the small town where her mother grew up for the reading of her mother's will. And what she's really shocked to learn is not only is there an inheritance, but she has to complete a series of seemingly absurd tasks in order to claim her inheritance. But she does not want to stay in this small town. She's been living all over the country. Why would she want to settle in the South in a small? But if she's going to get the inheritance, which she really wants, she's got to stay for a few months. But the destiny part is that the tasks seem really absurd at first. But when she starts completing them, what she realizes is that her mother had a really well thought out plan for why she chose these things for her daughter. She knew that she would not be around for her daughter's whole life. She could not control what her daughter was doing. I mean, she was kind of dragging her daughter around across the country because that's what her mama wanted her to do. But at that point, Maddie gets to figure out who she wants to be. She gets to, you know, figure out her own destiny. You know, for so long, it was what her mama wanted her to do. And she was okay with that. If you grew up, you were kind of okay with what your parents wanted for a while. And then either you want to or you need to figure out who you are, where your place is in the world. And one of the really sweet things her mama did was she did set up these tasks to help Maddie figure out what she wanted to do, and that it was okay to plant roots somewhere and stay somewhere long enough to cultivate a life and love and friendships, which is nothing she had actually experienced before that point. So I think she had a destiny, and she just had to find it and figure out, oh, this is the one that I want.
So this is interesting because we're kind of using destiny and karma in a interchangeable way, which I suspect is a little wrong, but we're gonna go with it. So tell me about how you two met. Magic or karma,
Yes.
or magic and karma.
Both.
It actually was, right?
Yeah.
So we met last July 4th at a author's party in the Hamptons. Sounds very fancy, it was. Very posh, and we're like, woo, look at this. Yeah, so we were invited to this party, and we decided to share a house. So they had like the big house, and then of course, and they had like the little cottage in the back, and we said, we'll take the cottage in the back. We wanted we wanted to be quiet and, you know, be able to just kind of rest and not have all the, you know, constant kind of things going on. So it was really nice because the house in the back had a gallery, right? So we were able to walk in and out of the gallery, look through the gallery during the day. But before we went on the trip, we got introduced, and I remember us getting on the phone and having the conversation about like how we would, you know, end up there, because it's kind of hard to get to the Hamptons. It's like one road, takes forever to get there. I don't know if you've done that, right? It's a lot, right? So we decided to meet in the middle. I think it was in Baltimore. Yes. She came from Nashville. I came from Atlanta. We met in the middle. I remember thinking, I think I just met my best friend, my new best friend. And we just hugged, and we, you know, we had never met each other before. So we had that flight together. And then we had what, 2.5-hour drive from Long Island into the Hamptons. And we just connected. We had so many things in common. It was destined for us to meet that weekend. And I think we both had said the best thing that came out of that weekend is that we met. And after that, we probably talked every day for like 6 months or more. And
Well, until now.
Until now, yeah, exactly.
We're still talking.
Exactly. And I remember along the way, she was saying to me, she said, I want to do a book tour. And I was like, I want to do a book tour too. Let's do it. You know, and no one had really been doing it for a couple of years, you know, with COVID. And so we just kind of got our heads together and decided to do it together. And it's kind of like Girl in the Traveling Pants, you know, but with the traveling books. So we're going all these beautiful independent bookstores. And I think we spend way more money than we always make. I'm serious. We come home with bags of books. But it's beautiful to get that energy in all these different bookstores, and we're sharing stories and we're brainstorming. You guys don't know this, but right before you got here, we were in the corner and I was pitching her my next book. I'm like, okay, listen. She said, give it to me in 2 lines. I'm like, oh, here it is. So it's really wonderful to have a companion who's also a writer and also is a business person, and we can kind of bounce these ideas off each other. So it's lovely. I mean, I can't imagine doing this alone, and I had like the best person to do it with. So that's how we met.
Yeah.
So one of the things that was really striking to me reading your books is, you know, they both start in Georgia.
Oh,
Well, you don't really start in Georgia, but you get to Georgia very quickly. But they're really different Georgias.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right? They're really different Georgias. And you know, it was so striking to me to have kind of the small town Georgia versus the not only Atlanta, Georgia, because I lived in Atlanta, but I did not recognize that scene, you know, that hipster scene. So you know, I'm curious about your experience of the South.
Okay.
And are these exaggerated, made up Georgias, or are these Georgias that you've experienced? Like, you know, we're talking like 2 really different Georgias, really different.
You
So
want me to talk about the
Yeah,
small one?
go ahead.
So the town of Ivy Ridge, Georgia is where the majority of my story takes place. And it's made up, it's fictional. And I grew up in Tifton, Georgia, which is a very small town. Oh, you've heard of it? Oh, yay. Okay. It is a tiny town. I mean, no offense to Tifton. It is small, but it's right off I-75. So a lot of people who've traveled to Florida have driven through it. They're like, oh, I spent the night there. It's got a lot of hotels off the interstate. But that is where I grew up. And it's what you think of a small town in Georgia. It's a little bit agricultural. it's a lot agricultural. But for Ivy Ridge, what I wanted to do is pull out my favorite things about living in a small town in Georgia and then combine it with what I imagine a cozy town. Okay, this is not Southern, but New England Hallmark movie where you've got that main street and you've got, the leaves will change and everybody knows who you are, which is true of the town I grew up in. I tell this story because it cracks me up. I went to college it's a 2-year school, a community college, and my psychology professor went to my church, and I had decided I wasn't going to go to class because I thought I could pass all the tests without attending class. But at the time, I don't know what college is like now, you could not pass if you missed 3 classes. So he pulled my daddy aside after Sunday school and said, "Your daughter is failing my class." And I was 19. So I thought I was an adult, but that's the kind of things that happen in a small town that I did not love as a 19-year-old. I should have been going to class. I get it, but I wasn't. And so everybody knows what you're doing, even when you don't want them to. So I wanted to incorporate some of that into Ivy Ridge, but I also wanted to incorporate the things I love about small towns, that people will bring you casseroles, they'll bring you food, they'll come pick you up, they'll watch your dog, they'll come and sit with your kids when you don't feel well. I mean, there's just wonderful community in the South, and even where I grew up. I mean, that even now people will still ask my parents how I'm doing. And I haven't lived there in 20 years, but they care. They're like, "How are your kids?" And so my Georgia in this book is a little bit of that. It's a little bit of that sweetness. And it's also for Maddie, who's not grown up in the South, kind of annoying because people are in your business. They want to come over and say, "Hey, oh, a new neighbor's here. Let's walk over." And she's not used to that. And so it's a little bit of both of those. Totally different from Love's.
Well, I don't know if it's totally different, because one thing that struck me was you were saying everyone's up in your business and everyone knows what you're all about. And, Love scenario's totally different, but in that restaurant, man, everybody knows. Yeah.
So my story, it's Atlanta, and it's funny because I've had a couple people say, "I went on Auburn Avenue and that restaurant's not there." I'm like, "This is all made up, guys. This is all." They're like, "It should be right there where you
They
go."
did.
Yeah.
They do that.
Like, where is it?
They wanted to have a book club at the restaurant,
Yeah.
but it's not real.
Yeah, somebody said, "Why can't we just go to that restaurant?" I'm like, "It's not a real thing." But I did situate it on a street. It's Auburn Avenue, which is right by Ebenezer Baptist Church and MLK Monument and all the whole things, right? And the area and I used to live in the area. I lived in Grant Park and the whole 9. So I lived in that area, and that area has a lot of history, in the 50s and the 20s, and it still is very historical. It's regentified. But in my stories, we start in a church, an Ebenezer Baptist Church. And I've been in that church. It's not the exact, going on in a church, but it would happen in that church. And it starts with the funeral, and it's not your typical funeral because there's a lot of gossiping and there's a lot of comments and things like that. And I wanted to be able to create a scene that was, how do you make a funeral funny and, poignant at the same time? That's what I was going for. I think it worked. But there's a lot of gossip and backstory, right? And a lot of in people's business happening in that particular scene. So what you have in my story, my characters are what you would call strivers, right? So they're upper middle class, in some cases wealthy class, and they're African American, they're Caucasian, there's a mix, right? And there's a lot of political, and I don't do political in my story because this is supposed to be fun, by the way. But they have aspirations to be more than what they are. And so you see a lot of designer clothes and a lot of, posturing, but what's really going on with the characters, we can all connect with that. And then you have another character who is extremely wealthy. Think Crazy Rich Asians. And I don't know if you guys know, but my book has been picked up for a film adaptation. And thank you. And one of the things that people said they liked was the whole Crazy Rich Asians thing. And the male POV is Indian, right? And he has this restaurant that he's set up right in the middle of a regentified Atlanta. And so he's actually trying to kind of create a whole new life for himself. He's very wealthy from India, but he wants to be American and he just wants to kind of do his own thing in the US. And so I'm showing him and how he's living, and it's over the top, but that's like the fun in it, right? The art. and the friends and the party and the restaurant
And where he lives.
and the clothes and where he lives and who he dates. And so it's escapism, but it's meant to be like Devil Wears Prada fun, and not to offend anybody fun, but just kind of slip into something interesting, right? So it's all the things I like to read and see. And it's almost like flipping through like a magazine and just kind of enjoying yourself with some great food. So different Atlantas, for sure.
Different Atlantas, and Love had me like, Googling all these different designers. I'm like, I'm trying to get the
Right.
visual. I'm like, and then I started looking things up. I'm like, maybe you'll see me at our next event, all glammed out. So one of the things that was really interesting to me, and again, it's the scale thing. Both of you had places in your story that were magical, right? So Jennifer, the house was magical. It reminded me a little bit of, do you remember Charmed?
Yes.
The TV show Charmed, how suddenly the house would, blow open the book of shadows, or, that the house had its own personality. It was part of the story. And Love, India became like this kind of magical landscape. So can you guys talk a little bit about just how you envisioned those places? And I mean, for me as a reader, both of those settings took on a life that was almost as big as the characters. And was that intentional? Was that what you're going
That's a
for?
great question. It's a great question. The house is the Russell family home. It's slightly enchanted, and it was not intentional. So I didn't even realize how much of a character it was until my editor, she said, your house is a character in this book. And I thought, oh, really? But it happened, I mean, it's organically, but accidentally in a way. So Maddie's born on Halloween, and every Halloween she'll come home because, like I mentioned, that she's been traveling across the country, but every birthday she'll come back to the Russell family home, and her Aunt Penelope will make her favorite cake. And so there's a scene where Maddie opens the pantry, and she knows that her aunt's going to be making the cake soon because the pantry has rearranged all the ingredients to put her birthday cake ingredients up front. And also they look like they're a little bit excited. They kind of jiggle a little bit, they kind of wobble. Nothing scary. It's not a creepy house, but it does things like this. If you upset it, it'll set the smoke alarms off. If it doesn't want you to get into a room, it'll close the door and you just can't get in. And you just have to wait it out. And it'll blink, it'll flash lights at you. So it is, someone described it as the lovable, annoying aunt, that it really loves you and it means well and it wants the best for you. And so it does what it can to try to give you nudges to where maybe you need to go or don't need to go. And I ended up, I love it. I mean, I live in that house for sure, for the pantry alone that will organize everything just when I need it. But I'm happy that it ended up that way, and it did become its own character and its own, the house thinks it's a family member. It thinks it belongs with the family just as much as the humans do. So it ended up being one of my favorites too, just because it's kind of sweet.
It's very sweet.
Yeah, it's kind of sweet.
Actually, that's my favorite part too. Yeah, I love the air conditioner and what it does in the summertime. So a lot of fun. So for me, India, I love to travel, and I get asked the question, where did you get the idea for this story? It's all fictional, by the way. I have to say that a lot because people are like, okay, so tell me. I'm like, that's not a real person. That's not a real person. But I got the idea when I went to a good friend's wedding in Delhi. She got married in India. She's American, but her family's in India, and she wanted to have a big wedding in India. And so I remember going to the wedding, which is several days long, as you know, and thinking, what would happen if an Indian matchmaker made a match for a feisty modern American? What would that be like? What kind of American? And the idea just kind of sat in my head for a few years. I didn't do anything with it. And I did a lot of journaling when I was at the wedding. And the wedding was very much like Crazy Rich Asians, like way over the top, right? And but there was so much stuff going on, I couldn't really write it, right? It was, sometimes things have to settle, kind of like a nice stew. But I knew people that went to India, people that had talked about going to India, and people who never wanted to go to India, just thought it was interesting. And I wanted to write a book for that. I wanted to write like a travel log for someone who have been and remind them, or someone who said, I never want to go, but I want to kind of get a feel of what it's like. And I put a lot into the description and the sights and the smells and the sounds and experiencing it with all of your senses. So for me, India absolutely was a setting, and it was purposeful. I wanted you to step out of the pages when you get off the plane with them and follow them into their India. And the alternating point of view, they're experiencing India in a very different way. So she's experiencing it as an American who's never been there before, and he's experiencing as an Indian who lived there and left, and now he's coming back with a different mindset and a different feeling, and just trying to kind of experience it in that way. So it absolutely is a setting, and I wanted you to kind of feel like you're there through that whole thing. So I do have a spoiler. When you read the book, you don't want to be hungry. So that's one of the things that I was told, because he's a chef and every single chapter has lots of food in it. And that's one of the things that our stories are very similar, right? We have recipe cards for each chapter and all that. And that's one of the things that we're connected in, but there's a lot of food in it. She talked about fashion, but there's a lot of food in the story. So that's also kind of a part of the setting.
Yeah, and this was really interesting to me. Love chose to put footnotes, and she tells you about the food in the footnotes. So like if you're reading the name of a food and you have no idea what it is, don't worry, she's got you covered. Which actually was a really interesting decision. Was that something you just knew you were going to do, or did you go back and forth, think about it? It's an unusual choice.
Yes, I mean, and I think now I figured out that people don't really need the footnotes as much, because I try to do a lot of
They have their phone and Google.
Yeah, and they're ordering. I literally hear this all the time. I had to order some of this food. I had never heard of that. That sounds great. And I like to do a lot of the preparation, and so you can see the ingredients that go into the food and all of that kind of, because I think that's kind of part of the story. Food brings people together, no matter what your differences are. We all have to eat. And to do that in a communal way is a way of kind of almost like breaking the bread and kind of setting the table for peace, right? So that's kind of how I see food as well.
So will someone give me a time check, because moderator did not put her stopwatch.
6:36.
6:36. We're doing quite well.
You're doing wonderful.
Yeah. So what I want to do, because we really only do have 9 minutes,
Okay.
and I want to make sure that you all get to talk about any highlights in the book or highlights in the process that you might not have gotten to talk about. And if you're kind of sitting here going, I don't really have anything, Maya, then what I would love to hear the two of you talk a little bit about is, Jennifer, your book is traditionally published, and Love, your book is self-published.
Mhm.
And these are two really different choices and two really different processes for moving a book out into the world. So if you have something more important to cover that. And if you don't, I would love to just hear about how these decisions came about, if they were intentional or fallbacks, or, and if you would do it differently, if you're happy with it. I think, I hope you all will indulge me, because as an author, I'm curious about this stuff, and I always think everyone else is too, but maybe I see some people nodding. Yeah, okay.
You want me to go first? You want to go first?
Okay.
It is a great question. I am independently and traditionally published, so I've done both. I started out maybe 11 years ago independently publishing. So I had a series that came out. I wrote a book a year. I put it out every year. And I did years ago shop for an agent. It didn't work out at the time. So I have the same, well, not the same stories. We all have different stories, but I have similar, I've been rejected a million times kind of thing. And so I still wanted to put a book out. And so I made the decision to put it out myself. And then every year I did that. So I had about 7 novels out. And then flash forward to maybe 2 years ago, the very first book I wrote is The Baker's Man. It was the first one I ever put out, but HarperCollins, it had done so well on its own with me that they wanted to relaunch it, which was a gift for me. I mean, that's not what I was trying to do at the time. I decided I was going to get an agent again. I wanted to try traditional publishing. There are pros and cons to both of them, and I love both of them for different reasons. But I did want a traditional deal just to see what it was like. If I loved it, great. If I didn't, I don't have to do it again. I mean, you're not locked into anything for life. So I said yes. They wanted to relaunch it. It's 20,000 words longer. They rebranded it. So I have been rebranding that entire Mystic Water series. I'm really grateful for it. This is the second book in that deal. It's not part of the series. It's a standalone, and even the series is a standalone. So as of right now, I still have independently published novels and I have traditional novels. So like I said, I love them both. I mean, I found an agent recently as well. So my path to being an author has been like nothing else that anyone ever talks about, that you can't get a traditional deal without an agent. It's not true. I did. You can't get a movie deal without an agent. You did too. I mean, so, you know, I always feel like those stories, you can tell them as much as you want, but they're not all true. Yeah, so I love the traditional route for the reasons that they have wide distribution and they have sales channels. But independent is wonderful because you can pick your own timeline. You can now we high level publish, as in like we get editors, we get proofreaders, we get cover designers, but you can do it in your own time. And if I wanted to do a super quirky story that maybe a traditional publisher wasn't interested in, I can put it out myself. And I'm just constantly learning ways to market and do publicity. And does that even answer it? Like, I love both of them. I appreciate the abilities I have for both ways, and I don't prefer one over the other.
Yeah. And, you know, I just want to like tap in because I saw a couple of people looking surprised. My first book, I got that deal without an agent. And in negotiating the deal, every time I kind of pushed back on the contract, the person at the publishing house was like, "Are you sure you want to write this book for us?" And I was like, you know what? If I were an agent, you wouldn't be asking that. You would just be thinking I was negotiating. So when it came for the time for the second book, I didn't want that experience again. So I actually had the deal already. And a friend, I called a friend's agent and said, you know, do you want a book deal that's already done? All you have to do is come in and negotiate it. And that's how I got my first agent. So, you know, you can do this so many different ways. Yeah.
Exactly. And I have an interesting story. So all the things that people say you can't do, don't believe them. You know, it's just not true. You know, you can't get a movie deal with your first book. You can't get it if you self-publish. Like, that's not true for me at all. None of it's true, right? But I wanted to do the traditional route. That was my first aim as well. And, you know, a lot of people said, oh, it's hard to get an agent. Well, it was easy for me to get an agent. It wasn't hard. I mean, I sent it out. I got several agents that were interested. And that sounds great, but wait for the rest of it. So I thought, man, I got my agent. I'm in there now. They love the story. They said, this is great. We like it. Oh, yeah. So I'm like, I'm in there now. We're going to do it. Then COVID hits and everything goes dark. And so, and before that, my first agent, I loved it, love her. She's still there in my life and involved. But she left the agency. So I became what they call orphaned. So I don't know if anybody's, you're nodding. So obviously you know what that is, right? So I was orphaned, and that basically means you don't have an agent attached to you anymore. So you have to get searched through the agency to find someone who will then take your story on. That is not an easy thing, and it is a very slow process. So in a lot of cases, it's just easier to just kind of move on. Make sure your contract says whatever it says and just kind of move on. And they're happy to say, okay, see you later. So then I quickly got another agent. I just went back to the second person on my list and they said, yeah, love it. Would love to do it. I got orphaned again during COVID, right?
Is that karma?
Yeah, I know, right? See, there's no giving up.
It's not magic, that's
right.
for sure.
Yeah. I mean, and I was devastated. I'm like, what am I gonna do? I mean, I've spent years in this process, you know, and I was sad and I didn't know what to do. And I remember being on vacation with my husband, and the kids had gone to bed and I was upstairs and I was like, I'm not doing this book anymore. We're done. Like, forget it. I have all these great stories. I'm moving on. He's like, oh no, you're going to do this story. Cause I've been hearing about this story for years. Oh, you're doing this. I'm like, no, you're doing it. Go and figure out what you need to do and get it done. So at that point I said, well, you know what? I don't care if one person reads it or 50,000 people read it. I really want the other one, but still, really, if one person reads it and they enjoy it, that's why I wrote the book. And so I said, well, let's just get it out there. Let's see what happens. Now, I'm skipping a couple steps. Everything has to be perfect, right? Because there's a lot of stigma. You have to have the readers, and I did the sensitivity readers, the cultural sensitivity readers, the editors, all the whole nine, like Met Galley, I mean, anonymous readers, the whole thing. I did all that, cover designers. So it's not an inexpensive process, but you do have controls within guidelines because you still have to look and feel like everything else. And so I did all of that, and I wanted to churn out the best thing I possibly could. I still did have relationships with my former agents, and they were like, yeah, girl, yeah, go. So with all of that in place, I released the book. And before the book even was in its first week, I had a production company, they're out of LA, and they said, man, I got early copy of the book. It's awesome. We like it. They read 5 pages and they're like, man, this is great. We love it. We like to buy it. So now I'm sitting here scrambling because I get this contract from they're rep by like the big agency, William Morris. And I'm super intimidated. Like, oh my God, what am I doing right now? And I mean, I have an MBA. I'm thinking I'm a smart person. I was way out of my league. So at that point, I realized I had to get an entertainment attorney and like somebody that's up there and knows what is happening. And I remember, and this was some networking, and I got this amazing entertainment attorney out of New York. And the first thing he said, he goes, I just had to meet you and figure out who in the world could get a book deal from this type of representation on the first, like, what is going on right now? So I was like, I know, right? What are we going to do? So anyway, my point is you can do it. That's it. You can do it. Now, traditional publishing, that's where I'm going next. But I don't think I would have been able to do it if I didn't just get the story out there. And there's 2 more books in the series. So it's going to be great. And I'm excited, but you can do it. That's all I can say. You can do it.
Okay, so Love has 2 more books in the series. Jennifer, what's next for you?
So I've got the next magical realism book comes out in January 2025. It has time travel in it, which I've never done before, but I'm really excited about. It's not time travel like the DeLorean, because that is sci-fi. This has an enchanted door. And the idea for the story, years ago, I went to a salvage yard, an architectural salvage yard in Nashville, and I saw this beautiful carved wooden door from the 1890s. And I thought, what would happen if I walked through that door? What's on the other side? And like Love, she carried her idea around for years. That was probably 15 years ago, and I've been carrying around in my pocket, in my other pants pocket. And I started thinking about time travel, and I thought, oh, wait, what if it's that door? And so that story was born, and next month I'll be able to share the cover and the title, because it's going to be the, whatever they call that, the cover reveal. I have to wait until they're ready. But I'm excited. I love the story. I'm really excited for something different, but still got the magical enchantment in it. And it goes back to the 1920s, so it's got a speakeasy in it. So I'm excited.
Love, do you have anything else going down?
Yes, so we're both doing our book reveal the same month, which is March. And my second book is called Bombay Baby, which is the name of the restaurant, or so you think. And we go back to India. Some of the characters come with us, and there's a lot of new ones as well. And we're going to be talking about the film industry. So we'll be dealing with the fun. Imagine the Oscars, but in India, the Indian Oscars. It's the international Indian Film Festival. And so it's all of the intrigue and fun stories there. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to Mumbai, which used to be, Bali. Bombay. Yeah,
I'm
Bombay.
like, don't look
Bombay.
at me. I'm like, scrambling that word, but yeah.
Bombay. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So that's the next one. So it's the insider's look into that type of story.
I'm super excited for both of those. And for y'all who want to hit my next thing, we don't know what it'll be, where it will be yet, but August 6th, the Night School for Young Mystics comes out. So
The Night School is how I found Maya for the first time, and I love that book. So I'm excited for the young readers version. I'm going to read it even though I'm not a young reader.
I actually think it's better than the original.
Oh.
So anyway, I think we're going to open it up for questions now. And, I would invite like questions, but also just discussion. If anybody has a definition of magic or karma that they want to share with us, get our juices going. We'll take that. We'll take questions. We'll take online questions. We'll take anything you got.
Thank you for writing your books and for sharing them. I guess my question as I was wondering is, when you were in the editing process, could you tell us something about your editing process, and was there something that you changed that was significant, and why?
Okay, so the question is, during the editing process, Was there anything significant that got changed and why?
Yes. For the magic all around, for sure. That's a great question, because the editing process for me is just releasing it to the editor and understanding that they want the best possible book for me. And Love will have a story about her darlings, and just being able to let things go, and understanding that I have done the best I can and it's okay to let things go. So the first chapter was, gosh, maybe 2,000 words long. They were like, get rid of it. It's slow. It's really cool information, but we're not actually that interested, but only because it made the story start slow. It was wonderful Halloween stuff. I was like setting the mood and getting this Halloween vibe, and it really wasn't active. So, and I totally get it. I will never use that piece again. I didn't reincorporate it later in the story, but it felt kind of weird to cut the whole first chapter. And they're like, you need to start here. They also, the very end, I knew where the story was going to end, but I have 3 point of views in the story, and the final chapter was someone else's point of view. And my editor said, I think this is going to be stronger if you have this from someone else's point of view. And she was right. It's so much stronger and more compelling with the way it ends now. And I was okay with that. It didn't make me sad. It used to years ago, but I've kind of gotten used to this idea that we all want the best for my book. And that means sometimes I'm going to have to let things go. But I'm really happy that I'm able to do that because it is a better book. How about you?
Oh yeah, that's a hard one, right? So what you will find is when you're writing a book, you're going to leave a lot on the cutting room floor, and it's painful to let it go, but you want the story to move forward, right? And a lot of exposition is just not going to happen. It doesn't move the story, and they come out of the story and they're in the story. So I felt like I had written several books when I kind of look at what gets discarded, and it's hard for me to release it. So I created this folder called the Little Darlings, and inside the folder, it's all of the remnants of, like, I think my best writing, and they're in these folders. And sometimes I visit the folder, I open them up if I'm, stuck somewhere and I need to be inspired. And I look back at all those things that I wrote that I really liked a lot, that no one's ever going to read but me. And I reminisce, and then I move on, right? And so the Little Darlings is your way of keeping it, but nobody's seeing it, and moving your story to the place that it needs to be, because everything has to matter on the page. Every character, every scene, all the dialogue has to earn its keep. And if it doesn't, it has to go. And the editor does not want to hear you explain why you kept X, Y, and Z person in, because that's going to leave a tip, forget about it. It's got to go, right? So it has to be its purest form at the end, and you just have to let it go.
It's really interesting because I write nonfiction, so I have a folder too, but when I need material, I mine that folder.
Oh, good.
So yeah, so I have a lot of stuff that I wrote for a previous book that got cut, and then I can't tell you how much went into the night school was the easiest book to read because I had stuff cut from all kinds of other books, and I was just like, pull this in, pull that in, cut and paste. I'm so glad I'm not on a typewriter. So yeah, so I think some of it is just the type of book you're doing. But the other thing that's interesting, and I think you both got to this place, I always say that at a certain point, publishing is a team sport.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you've got to be a team player,
Yeah.
Because you're too close to it. You just don't know best at a certain point. Somebody else has to look at it and give you a good opinion. Yeah.
Also, at a certain point, I'm just kind of tired of the story.
Yeah.
I just want to give it off to somebody.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, take this, please do, make her pretty, and then send it back later. I'm done.
I never reread. Do you all reread?
Wait, you mean
I
after?
do.
After I'm done, I'm done.
Oh,
I
I
am
do.
so done.
I reread. I do, because I want to get back that, you did this because you want people to enjoy it like you do. Can you read it again and see how you feel about it? Because I know I've heard actors say, I never see my work. I want to see it, because if there's something that I can improve next time, or I want to see what that feeling was, and it's nice. I don't mind.
Okay.
I don't mind it.
Yeah.
More questions? Do either of you all come from families that have magic people in them,
Oh,
or
That's a great question.
seers, or anything along those lines?
So the question is, do either of you come from families that have magical folks like seers or healers or, oracles?
Not that I know of. But what I have found growing up is that I'm able to sort of spot gifts in other people. And I might know they have that and they just haven't tapped into it, or they call it something different. Where I grew up, it was not cool to talk about being different, and especially if you were different in that kind of way. And so as I've gotten older, I can see it a lot more in the people that I grew up with and that I know, but they would not call it that. So I think, yeah, probably, but that's not how they would describe themselves. But I think if I find that I call it a talent that they have or a gift they have, they're more open to accepting that, calling it that, rather than things that might make them more uncomfortable. That makes sense.
Well, that is one of the phrase, like, oh, he or she's gifted. They have the gift, or they have the
Yeah.
gift of touch or something, so that, it's more palatable. So I can
Yeah,
see
I
that.
think so. I mean, I can, the older I've gotten, the more open I am to that. I can see that in people, whether it's my family or people around me, and I just feel them out for where they are in their life, or how okay they are with the different things. I feel like I can figure out what level it is and talk to them at wherever they are and keep them comfortable and feeling good about whatever that is. It's cool to have gifts. It's cool to be able to do things, whatever that is, whether you can draw or you can see. So I just try to be gentle with people about it if I can.
Well, it sounds like you might be a seer
Yeah.
I'm unconventional, I'll tell you that. I'm a dreamer. I do have really cool dreams. I do talk to people. If I dream about them, I'll let them know I dreamed about them. That's really cool to me. It's something I did for years. I didn't know it was a thing, and I'm okay talking about it because most people think it's cool. If I had a dream about Maya, I would call her. I'd be like, hey, here's a dream I had. Here's what I think it means, but you interpret it however you need to. So yeah, I love stuff like that. I love that we're all so different and that we've got different skills and talents and gifts. I think it's beautiful. I love finding out that stuff about people.
I think for me, and I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but my mom said that my parents said I was born with like a veil over my face.
A call.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, that doesn't sound good at all. But she said, no, it's a good thing. Like, it's a really positive thing. And so my name is, this is my real name. Love is my real name. I didn't like it as a child, but I realized that it's kind of a gift, because when you hear the name, it gives you a feeling and it reminds you, and it reminds me of what I need to exude, right? So, it's not that you can't have a bad day, but when you hear your name, when people are calling your name, you remember, like, it's really the only reason that we're here. And the stories that I write, I know there's a bit of a romance element in there as well.
A bit?
It's a bit, because I have bigger ideas that are going on there. There's a
But
cultural.
it is a great romance.
It is. But one of the reasons that I write the stories that I write is because my feeling is the thing that connects all of us. It doesn't matter what language, it doesn't matter where you end up, it doesn't matter, how much money you have or don't have, or what shoes you wear, or where you live in the world. Love is like that one thing that we all need, want, and can share, right? Like, and so I like to take stories about people that look, seem, act, come from different backgrounds. There's no way that they could ever meet, and there's no way they can have anything in common. And then they come together in a very positive way, and it influences the other people around them to realize we can connect. We didn't talk a lot about weddings, but weddings are not in the traditional way in like the Indian culture. And it's a way to bring families together. It's less about the two individuals and more about the family. And that's more about what my stories are. How people can be different, come from different places in the world, and come together and want to support each other because they love each other. They've grown to love each other, whether it's romantic love or it's friendship or it's a reconnection with parents or community.
All right. Any other? Yeah. We have two like back to back here. So
Sure.
I'm curious of writing as a certain kind of magic, a certain kind of spell casting in a sense. And I'm just curious what heightened senses of that hyperactivity, that hyper realism you said,
Yeah,
did you experience in your own writing of
Okay.
these stories?
So the question goes back to that idea of hyper reality and how the two of you experienced it, as the author in the writing process.
So it's really interesting for me. Writing, it just brings me a lot of joy. I love doing it. And I just feel like I'm an open channel for stories. I would dream about my characters sometimes. I also daydream a lot and they just show up kind of fully formed in my mind. So for me, writing, when I get into the flow, I don't really know what I'm writing. I'm just writing so that often when I go back and read it later, I will sometimes think, I wrote that. So it's very magical to me because when I'm in the state of flow and I'm creating, I'm not paying attention to, I'm not editing, I'm not critiquing anything, I'm just writing stuff. And so it's magical for me because I just feel like I'm an open channel for something that's coming from somewhere else because I love the stories. I don't know where they come from here and I'm just putting them on the page. So it's always magical to me, but I love it. It just brings me so much joy to be open to that creativity. So I can't take credit that I just made the whole thing up. I feel like it just comes from somewhere really special. It's a story that needs to be told, whether for me or there's someone else out there that needs this story. They'll pick it like we do with all our books. We pick up a book and you're like, God, I needed this story exactly right now. I think that's the magic of books. And so I just think it's just part of that.
I mean, I could agree. I feel like we're channels. The story's just coming to us. I've probably written some of my best chapters. I have a little notebook next to my bedside and the light's not even on sometimes because I don't want to, wake.
If we're on tour, she doesn't want to wake me up.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Or my husband, like I don't want it to have a light blaring. So I'll have a notebook, I'll have a pen and I'll just write it. And sometimes it's crazy all over the place, but that's where I've gotten some of my best ideas from just that writing. I really do believe that we are being channeled for whatever story that we have in us. And so whatever that story you have that has to come out, you're the only person that can write that story just like that. So that should be the comfort in, can I do it and can I do it well? No one else can do it but you because it's your story, right? Whether it's fiction, nonfiction, you're the best person to tell that story uniquely in the way you're going to tell it. And so with that pressure kind of off, it makes it, the other part is mechanics, making sure that it's right on the page, it's grammatically correct and all those beautiful things that come in the polish, but the creation is yours. So that's how I see it.
I'm sorry, was there a final?
There's one final question.
Do you have it?
That'll be the wrapping it up question.
Wrapping it up. Yeah, well, thank you, ladies, so much for this magical evening. And I'm a nonfiction memoirist myself, so I'm just so, I don't know, inspired by the ability to make things up. And I would love to be able to do that sometime, but I'm not, that's not where it is for me. Anyway, so I had a specific question for Love about your bio talks about you being an MBA and a marketing professional, and how do you then juggle the life of business with the life of creativity? How does that work for you?
Do you want to?
Or has one taken over from the other or such?
So the question is, how do you balance, your professional career with your author career? Jennifer,
Because the business versus the creativity.
the business. Okay. So for me, I used to worry a little bit about like, how do you split yourself? But I feel like it's all the part of the wholeness, right? And the elements that I'm able to kind of draw from them. For example, I used to work at Google, just one of the companies I work for. And one of the scenes in my story, it's not Google, by the way, sorry, Google, it's not you, but there's an office scene at a tech company. And so you take some of those experiences that you have and you add it into the story. But I don't actually feel the division there because it's part of the wholeness. I mean, I've literally been in business meetings and I'm thinking we're getting down to business because this is business time. And the first thing a person will say is, hey, I got your book for my wife. I know it's for you, but I got it for my wife. Can you sign this for me? And I'm like, what? Because I have to get my head reshifted around to that. But it helps me with the writing because writing is also a business. It's part creative, but it's also business as well. So it helps me kind of separate that right and the left brain to figuring out, okay, now the book's done. Now, how do you get it out there to the world? How do you market it? What's the persona? And some of those things that some other people may be overwhelmed with, I'm kind of drawn to them.
I also think your creative constantly.
Mhm.
Even in her business, she's thinking of creative ways to market things. So like her brain is never really not creative. It's just, I just think you shift very easily into writing a story. I'm working on my business right now. It seems like unnatural, but she's
Thank
very
you, Jennifer.
natural. I mean, it's true.
And talented, obviously.
Yeah, it's,
Well,
yeah.
thank you. I appreciate it. But this is like what I love. And it was funny. I'm telling something personal, but my husband pinged me. He said, "You haven't put anything about your like the business or what all the cool stuff we're doing in like 2 months." I'm like, "Well, okay, whatever. Like I'm doing this." So like I have pictures of my tour on LinkedIn and people are like, "Oh girl, where are you now?" So that's, that's kind of taken over because I love it so much. It's like my passion. So I think it comes across and people appreciate it. They don't mind that.
Any concluding remarks as we wrap up for the evening?
Thank you. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you all for sitting here with us. This has been a really wonderful experience.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you.
Absolutely.